everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. In this episode, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to blind adventurer Miles Hilton-Barber. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi Miles, how are you?
I'm doing good, Evie. Lovely to be with you all today.
It is such an honour to have you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm very, very excited to talk to you. We have a lot of things to cover and talk about, all about your life and your adventures. But before we get into all of that, how's your day going? What have you been up to recently?
I was out earlier feeding the birds. I've got several bird feeders in the garden and very exciting going out. I can actually identify birds not only by their sound, but also by the way they fly, which is interesting.
Oh wow, that is very impressive. How are you able to do that? Is it just by like hearing them so often? Like the same
Um,
type of birds often come?
it's sparrows, for example, have a much higher sort of humming sound than, for example, a starling. Um, Doves are very different. Jackdaws, again, are different. So it depends. You just get used to them. And sometimes even individual birds. We had one little robin with the one wing had a feather slightly out of place. And I could hear the different way that it flew. And I knew that was our robin coming to have some food.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. That's a really cool little kind of like talent to have. And I love that as well. I think things like that, kind of like feeding the birds and those kind of things. I think it's such a nice kind of thing to do, and I imagine very relaxing as well.
Yes, and Evie, you know very well as a fellow blind person that sighted people miss so much because they're 80% of the information comes through your eyes. I've sometimes stood by a stream, said to my daughter, close your eyes and tell me what can you hear. Well, I can hear the water. No, pay attention. How many different sounds? She came up with, it was either 11 or 12 different sounds of chortling, splashing, tinkling, swirling. And I said, that's a whole orchestra, an aquatic orchestra there. And most sighted people ignore it and they miss it out. And you're just saying about um, orchestral stuff in your own life. So there's a lot of things we can appreciate and pass on to sighted people to stop and pay more attention to our beautiful world.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a very lovely metaphor, but I agree with you. I think there's maybe a slight maybe misconception when it comes to having a lack of sight that we have like heightened senses. And I wouldn't say it's that as much. I just think we're more in tune with the senses that we do have.
Yes, and a lot of people, well, I initially, when I first went blind, I thought it was a rubbish thing, but our quality of life, Evie, is not in any way lower than other people. If anything, we've got a higher quality of life because we appreciate, they often say that health is a crown we sit on our head with nonchalance until it gets tilted a bit, and all of a sudden we realize how much we've taken for granted. So for me, I'm able to run, I can smell, I've got good touch. Um, so there's many things to appreciate, and I think the trick, the secret of happiness, isn't having what you want. It's wanting what you have and being grateful for the world around you rather than. Uh, there's a lovely prayer: God grant me the serenity to accept the things in my life that I cannot change, the courage to change those that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think for you and I, it's appreciating what we have got. Don't waste time wanting something we won't have right now, but appreciating all the other things that people take for granted and don't appreciate themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And I think it can be an art form sometimes, especially kind of when when you have lost something like sight or one of your senses, to appreciate those things. But I think it's when you've mastered the art form, it's a very kind of nice thing to do and something I think we definitely should do. But we've obviously, kind of just mentioned that you, like myself, are visually impaired. So could you tell me a little bit about your visual impairment?
Yes, Evie, so I have what is called RP, retinitis pigmentosa. So basically, I've got a perfect image going into my eye, onto the back of the eye, the retina, but the retina is packed up, so the image just isn't being transferred to the brain. Um, and in my case, it happened slowly. It happened over a number of years. I slowly lost my central vision, struggled with night vision. And once I had it diagnosed, I was 21 when it was diagnosed. It was my great 21st birthday present. And I still could see, I could still read, but struggled, and then lower, lower. And by the time I was 30, I had absolutely no vision. I can't tell walking into a room if it's light or dark, but sometimes I get confused. I think it is light, and other times it is bright light, but of course I can't see anything. And I keep on telling my wife, stop wasting electricity. You can feel your way around the room. Why do you want, you know? Anyway, so the trick is enjoying life. And Evie, I can honestly say I'm much, much more fulfilled and happy now as a blind person than when I could see. Um, you, my huge admiration and respect for you because you've never had sight. So at least I know what a jumbo jet looks like if I hear it going overhead, motorcar trees. Um, you could feel a tree, but for you, you've got to imagine, colors, all sorts of things. Um, so I've got so much to be grateful for. And anytime my wife and I are having a hard day, we just start counting our blessings. And by the time you've counted all the good things around you, you forgot what you were upset about.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting perspective. And I'm actually really glad you brought up the kind of differences between never having sight and losing it over time due to a condition that deteriorates or whatever, because I think they bring up different challenges. There are kind of pros and cons to each. Because, like you say, for me, I have no idea what things look like. I know what things feel
Mhm.
like. I know what a table feels like. I know what the chair I'm currently sitting on feels like. I don't know what they look like. So, yeah, you have to use your imagination. But then for you do know what things look like. And as much as that can be a blessing, you then also lose that. You know what it was like to once have sight, and that kind of deteriorates. And I think you were 21, you say, when your condition kind of started, coming into play and your eyesight started deteriorating. That's such a, I feel like in your early 20s, you wanna get out, you want to see the world. And I think that must have been quite a
Mhm.
difficult age to have that happen. I guess you maybe felt like, things were kind of out of your control.
Yes, I mean, initially when I was diagnosed, I grew up in Zimbabwe, it used to be called Rhodesia. It's a country just above South Africa, Central Africa. Um, when I learnt I was going blind, my best friend came along, said, Miles, I hear you're going blind. Probably the worst thing that could happen to anybody in the whole world, and it's happened to you. And I thought, it's nice having friends, when times are rough, having people to sort of rub the salt in. No, it's worse than you think. So, yeah, initially, as I lost my sight, Evie, I lost my confidence, I lost my dignity, I lost my independence. Um, you know very well, you can look a bit of a twit, for me, starting to learn to use a mobility aid, a white cane. I was so embarrassed using it, and I thought and I wasn't very good using it, going down the pavement, and I didn't want to use it. I thought, well, people think I'm dumb. I'm fairly thick because I'm using a white stick. And my kids say, Dad, you are thick. Just use the stick. You don't worry. So I've got three lovely kids, and we joke a lot, and they play tricks on me. So they don't see my blindness as something to feel sad for, And I've taken them with me on adventures. But yeah, I think that if you can't have a sense of humor, Evie, you've got a tough life ahead of you. Um, and that amazing lady, Helen Keller, she was born deaf and blind. I mean, hey, Evie, you can hear me. What a blessing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't that
yeah,
amazing?
exactly. Yeah,
So,
I know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And she said sight without vision is equal to blindness. And yeah, there's so many people who have 20/20 vision, but are they happy? No. You see them going past in their BMWs or whatever, and they've got a face like a bag full of spanners, with the world on their shoulders. So 20/20 vision isn't essential for happiness. It's just one of the gifts, the blessings we have. But the whole thing about life, Evie, is whatever life throws at us, these custard pies got dumped on us. Um, it's a matter of finding a way through. Anything could be a little thing. Your dog is sick, the kettle's broken, you've broken an ankle. These are all things, changes in life that we don't expect. And for me, the trick, if we're going to get through life and enjoy it, it's learning how to face unwanted change and making the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you there. You obviously talk a lot about kind of how to get through life and finding ways around challenges. And I think you have had a very, your story and the amount of adventures you've been on and the things you've experienced are incredible. And I'm very excited to talk about all of them, but I suppose the best place to start is the beginning. You kind of briefly mentioned your childhood there, but can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and any aspirations you had at the time?
Yes. Well, Evie, some people think, Miles Hilton-Barber, blind adventure, thinking I was always a very outgoing person, but the exact opposite is the truth. Um, I was the youngest in my class in Rhodesia, as it was then. You started school in January, not in September for the new year. I was born just before the end of December, so I was by far the youngest in my class. I was a skinny runt, that's how I describe myself. I knew my place in class. Everyone was bigger than me, older than me, and often they'd picked up on life. I mean, I was almost a year behind a lot of the others, so I knew my place in life that I couldn't expect to do very much. I had an older brother, Jeff. He was A stream, I was B stream. I didn't know I had a brain. I didn't know I could achieve things. So I went through school having fun, but messing around. I wasn't very good with my GCSEs. Took me a few goes to get them, and what we did was then matric. Um, my dad and his two brothers were all three of them were World War II fighter pilots. And then, as I was growing up, my dad was the head of civil aviation in what was then the Federation Rhodesian Iceland. So he was all non-military aircraft. He was the boss of it in what's now Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. So when I was 18, I decided I'd want to join the Air Force, be a pilot like my dad. Went for my medical, but they said, Miles, your eyesight isn't good enough. You'll never fly, never be a pilot. I didn't know I was going to go blind then. 3 years later, learned I was going blind, and everyone around and society, Eva, I don't know if you find it, but society in all the countries I visited, they all presume that blindness, or in fact, most disabilities, automatically result in a lower quality of life for the person with that disability. Shame, they need help, and they can't be expected to do much. So that was my attitude when I was diagnosed as going blind. The ophthalmologist, no support, just sorry, Miles, you're going to go blind, blah, blah. And I'd never met another blind person growing up in Rhodesia. I came over to England um, in my early 40s, so way back in 1992, 93. My wife is English, got three children, a son and two daughters, four granddaughters. Out of interest, all of my children are carriers of this thing, RP, retinitis pigmentosa. If any of them had had sons, they would all go blind like me. Daughters will only be carriers, and isn't that fascinating? We've got four granddaughters and no sons. Anyway, so that was my start in life. When I came over to England, my sight was just not there. But in Zimbabwe, I was too embarrassed using a stick much. When I could see, I was a pharmaceutical rep. When I could still see, I was selling chemicals, cosmetics, all sorts of stuff. Then I was managing a group of supermarkets, also called Tesco, but not linked to Tesco here. So that was it. I was in sales in the early part when I could see okay. Came over here, joined the RNAB, um, and the best I thought was, let me see what other blind people can do. And I realized that other people, some had guide dogs, others had white stick, long canes, and some of them were living independent lives, accountants, lawyers, judges, even computer programmers. And I suddenly thought, wow, maybe I can do more with my life. Um, and the best I thought is try and copy other people. If they can do it, then I can try and learn all the skills. And certainly, Evie, for blind people and for any disability, think about a tunnel. So some blind people, they diagnose as going blind. They go into this tunnel and basically you've got to go through the tunnel. It's a learning experience. If you play Monopoly, you've got to go past Go to get your £200. For me, I initially thought my lot was just living in darkness. I couldn't achieve anything. RNAB and the local association for the blind in Derbyshire here gave me lessons, and I started learning these independent living skills and clothing and mobility using computer. So I was moving through this tunnel, and I was then with the RNAB, I was an employment consultant helping other people with sight loss, how to cope with it. A lot of them were just sitting in this cave, this sort of tunnel of darkness, and they thought all they could do is get some benefit. That was the all they could do. And I was saying, no, no, yes, benefit and support is good, but you've got to keep on going. You've got to learn how to get around independently with mobility, learn how to use computer, learn how to choose your clothes, how to cook independently. And every independent living skill it takes you through, in the end, you're back into sunshine in the other side. It's a different world. It's a bit like Alice in Wonderland. It'll never be the same, but I suddenly realized I was in the world with other blind people, but some people weren't as didn't have as many sort of goals to do things in life. So all of a sudden, I was no longer competing against other sighted people as I was losing my sight. Now I was competing with other blind people, and I suddenly thought, wow, big change in my life. So any blind people listening, in fact, doesn't matter what your disability is, learn all you can about independent living with whatever your disability is. And the key is to become as independent and fulfilled as you can. Um, and for me, of course, the big turning point, I was 50 now living in the UK, but still thinking the best I could do is copy other blind people. My brother's also totally blind. It's genetic, was in the family. He was still living in Durban in South Africa. He built a yacht by field in his back garden, Evie. And then, you can imagine the neighbors thinking, who do you think is Noah? What is the blind man doing building a yacht in the garden? Anyway, he launches it and it doesn't sink. And everyone said, oh, bless Jeffrey, built by a blind man. And it's still floating after 10 minutes. What are you going to do? And Jeffrey said, I'm going to sail it solo from Africa to Australia, all alone, no one else on board, with very primitive speech output on his navigational instruments. Everyone said, Jeffrey, it's impossible for a blind man to cross an ocean solo. You're not just a blind man, you're a stupid blind man. My brother said, no, not impossible, just never been done before. And that was the turning point. My brother saying to me, Miles, many things in our lives as blind people never been done before. Doesn't mean say they're impossible. So there was a big turning point. So I only started doing my adventures and expeditions, Evie, when I was 50.
Wow. I mean, that is, yeah, I can imagine that's a huge turning point. I think what you said earlier about moving to England and having the opportunity to observe other blind people and observe how they live their lives. I think, and it's something I end up talking about quite a lot on this podcast, but I think one of the most important things you can have as, yes, someone with a disability, but I think anyone in life is role models, or not even that, just the ability to observe other people, observe how they live their lives, how they're doing things, and get kind of inspiration from that. And having your brother do something like that, someone so close to you do something like that, something that everyone thought was impossible, but he said, just hasn't been done before. I mean, that must have been kind of quite a big inspiration for you and maybe a bit of a kind of wake up call to do the things that you wanted to do and thought you couldn't do.
Yeah. So the best advice he gave me, Evie, we said, look, you want to be a pilot. Everyone says you can't be a pilot because you're blind. I said, the trick is start with your dream, whatever you want to do in life. So my recipe for success, which I pass on to anyone, 4 little steps: dream, decide, plan, persevere. So number one, start with your dream. So my brother said, look, stop saying you can't be a pilot because you're blind, because that's what everyone says. Society says, obviously, if you're blind, you can't be a pilot. He says, the question is, how can a blind person fly? How can you be a pilot if you're blind? Very different question. So I suddenly thought, nothing wrong with my brain. Everything works in my brain, except my eyes don't. They're not a good source of information going into the brain. So my brother said, well, isn't there any other way you get information from your flight instruments into your brain? I thought, well, yes, my ears. So I spent 4 years getting someone help design speech output and all of the basic flight instruments, airspeed, ground speed, altitude, compass, track, everything. So I thought I didn't want to have someone sitting next to me telling me how to fly. That's not independent. So I decided I'd become a microlight pilot and I wanted to fly from London to Sydney. So I thought if my brother could sail to Australia from Africa, maybe I could fly there. 4 years, many things went wrong. Trying to get a sponsor, learning how to fly. So now I fly using my ears. On my flying suit, I had a set of about 30 little buttons, a bit like a numpad on a computer, but they were sticking up, and that gave me all the information I needed. So the turning point was don't start with a problem. Oh, I'm stuck in a wheelchair. I can't do anything. I'm deaf. I can't do anything. Think, how can a person in a wheelchair do this or that or whatever? So that turned my life around. Stop allowing society to determine what blind people could or couldn't do. So that was it. So that was my first, well, it wasn't my first big adventure, but certainly that was one of the things I did. I managed to fly to Australia 51 days. I had a sighted co-pilot with me. Um, 3 massive storms and problems, but maybe I'll talk more about that later. But basically, that was the me realizing start with a dream. Secondly, make a decision. So maybe Evie, you want to run, I don't know, do a park run or 10K or a marathon. You don't start by getting fit. You start with a dream, make a decision, right? I'm going to run a marathon. So the first thing isn't to start training, get fit. First thing is sign up, right? You're doing the London Marathon or whatever it is, Isle of Wight. So, and then third thing is plan. Whoops, I better do some training. And lastly, persevere because the wheels usually fall off in life, but the trick is to not to give up. So that was me. So I did end up, my dad unfortunately died before either me or my brother had done any of our sort of adventures. And I think my dad and mum felt a bit guilty. They had 2 sons, both had gone blind. It wasn't their fault, but I wish my dad was still alive to see all the things that we both did. Um, yeah, but he was a great role model with all of his achievements in life. So, yes, that was my start. Dream, decide, plan, persevere. Don't start with your problem, your disability. Start with what you want to do. And then step two, decide how the heck, if I'm blind or deaf or in a wheelchair or I've lost a couple of legs, how can I do this or that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a really brilliant way to go about it. And I think, yeah, yeah, I really like that kind of little motto almost. I think it's a great way to think about things. But obviously, flying that microlight was incredibly successful, even if it did have its ups and downs. And I mean, it'd be great to kind of talk a little bit more about that. How did the whole process go? It was a success, obviously, but how did you find it? Because it is genuine, like it's an incredible accomplishment.
Um, Evie, yes, so we're back at about 2007, I think it was. First of all, I needed a sponsor. Finally, I got the Standard Chartered Bank to sponsor me. We were hoping to raise about £1 million for children in the developing world born blind with cataracts. Only takes people called sight savers. We were supporting. £25 is all it was needed for a child have the cataracts taken off and to see for the first time. I had a co-pilot with me, 4 years planning. The night before we were due to leave, and so I was down at Biggin Hill outside London. We're flying Monday morning. All the world's media and press was there. Um, but the night before, in the afternoon, or early evening, my co-pilot has a panic attack, and all of a sudden he's not coming, and he's off to the toilet phoning his wife. I'm not going to go. We're going to die. And tell the children Daddy loves them. I'm coming home. I said, something I should know. He says, Miles, I'm not coming. Why? Because we're going to die. Why will we die? Because you're blind. And I said to him, listen, you've seen me wandering around with a white stick for the last 4 years. Why didn't you have a panic attack 4 years ago? True story. So 10 o'clock at night, me with my sighted guide that I've been on other expeditions. He was the sort of manager of this project. I was on the phone at 10 o'clock at night trying to find someone willing to fly in a microlight, starting 11 hours later, all the way to Australia with a blind man. And believe it or not, Evie, in between 10 and 11, I found two people, uh, quite amazing. And one of them flew the first part as far as Cyprus, and then the other swapped over. So we started 2 days later. But a lot of pressure because I was hoping to raise the money through speaking at banquets all the way to Australia, set up by the Standard Chartered Bank. Um, yeah, so amazing. We had several big storms on the way. Um, One of the worst flying from one of the islands, Penang in Thailand, heading for Kuala Lumpur. Massive storm, thunder, lightning, almost like a monsoon deluge. And yeah, we nearly flew into a huge rocky peninsula coming out of the coastline, but we managed to miss it sort of fairly narrowly, but got there. And yeah, 55 days later, got to Australia. And in the early years, I did quite a lot of conference speaking after a while. Um, and I thought initially, Evie, I maybe could talk to other blind people to encourage them. And so then I started speaking at conferences set up by the RNIB, and often people would come after it, sighted people, say, Miles, thank you very much for your talk. You've really opened my eyes to my own potential. And I thought, isn't that funny? I'm a blind person and I'm giving sight or vision to sighted people. So anyway, that was it. And I think in the end, Evie, I'm only estimating, but perhaps about 40,000 children between here and Australia have got their sight through me living my dream and flying to Australia. So I felt very privileged. My wife has just had cataracts taken to both of her eyes. And I suddenly thought, oh, you did that for these little children. And when I was in Dhaka in Bangladesh, um, John Major, who used to be the Prime Minister here, he was the patron of sight savers. And he was describing how this young Bangladeshi mother, she had a little girl in her lap of about 6 years old, I suppose. And the doctor was undoing the bandages around this little girl's face, around her eyes. And this little girl sitting in her mum's lap looked up at her mummy and said, so that's what you look like, mummy. And that was just £25. And what a privilege to think of all those people who can live normal lives now, all because of sight savers and the Standard Chartered Bank offering to sponsor me. So a big thing as well, if people believe in you, Evie, um, once I started doing a few things, even though I may not succeed at some of them, at least that people could see I was giving a good crack at it. It wasn't really that hard to get sponsorship and to get people to believe in you. So after flying, I thought, hey, I want to fly the airplane. I would have flown in the Rhodesian Air Force, which is called a Hawker Hunter. It's a subsonic fighter jet from the 1960s, flies top speed of about 600 knots, just below the speed of sound. So I did some aerobatics in one of those. I phoned up and got permission to have a flight with them. And then I thought, hey, I want to go supersonic. It's always, I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. I don't want to go and climb the same mountain. I want to do new things all the time. Um, yeah, just before I tell the next thing, another big thing I've learned early on, Evie, is the importance of you and me stepping outside our circle. So if you or anyone listening to the podcast draw an imaginary circle around where you're sitting, um, that represents everything you've done in your life up until now as we speak. So if if you do something you've never done before, Evie, like go scuba diving or do a park run, whatever it is, bake a cake you've never done, that experience is outside your circle. The only way for that new experience to become part of your circle, say scuba diving, your circle has to grow so that that new experience becomes part of your life because now you've done it. So here's a question for everyone listening. When was the last time you did something for the first time? Because that was the last time you grew as a person. So a lot of people say, Miles, I'm so busy in my circle. Well, that's good. You might be school teacher, whatever it is. You might be busy, but your circle isn't growing. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. And the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. So I often say to people, if you're stuck in a rut, hey, baby, you're going to die one day. We're not coming back as Brazilian tree frogs. So what you want to do in your bucket list, you got to do while you're alive. I've done quite a few marathons I've talked about. I've never been overtaken by a skeleton doing a marathon. Dead people don't run marathons. So whatever you want to do, you've got this thing called life. And someone once said to me, all of us, Evie, have been given two lives, and we begin the second one the day we realize we've only got one. So the trick is get out there. And a lot of people think when I've got more money to go to that place on holiday, I'll do a marathon when I'm fitter. I always say to people, start with, do you want to go to Thailand on holiday? You can't really afford it. Okay, go and book it, pay the deposit, and then think, whoops, now I've got until June or August or something. And so always the trick is make that commitment, do it, tell other people I'm going to do this, make a decision, then plan, whoops, I better do some training. I've never trained enough, Evie, for any of the marathons. I've done, for example, we'll talk a bit later, I want to be the first blind man hauling a sledge at the South Pole, 760 miles. And I thought, well, it's hard to do any training because I'd never skied on snow before anyway. But if you're going back to a marathon, never done enough training. So the first half of the marathon, that's training. So blind man, you're going to do a marathon. How's your training? Well, actually, I'm only doing a half marathon a day. No, this is a marathon. Yeah, I know, but first half is training, so I haven't done very much training. And then I'm only doing a half marathon. And again, in my head, the trick, also with whatever you do, it's pointless having a dream that's so small you can put into a matchbox. Shame on you. That's pathetic. Why bother? But if you have a huge, big dream, crazy big, um, it's amazing if you just make that commitment and it just happens. So I would say to anyone listening, if you've got things you'd love to do one day, one day I'll do this. Well, one day never comes. Uh, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? So even for you listening, Evie, or your mum, or anyone listening, it's the beginning of the new year, things you want to do, make a commitment, sign up for the park run, uh, go and, if you want to learn to play the piano, guitar, hire the piano, go phone up now, Monday, whatever day it is you're listening, go, sign up for the lessons and just make a commitment. So, yeah, so what was I saying? So after flying the Hawker Hunter, I decided to go supersonic, thing called an English electric lightning, a place called Thunder City, Cape Town. This was the late 1960s, 1970s frontline fighter. Um, Amazing airplane. So Anyone who's seen Top Gun, I don't know, Evie, whether you've listened to the film Top Gun, but I've listened to it about 15 or 20 times. I love Top Gun with Tom Cruise just because I'm a little kid that had never grown up. So I was in Cape Town, I had some television people there, and I was standing in front of this supersonic fighter pretending to be Tom Cruise. If anyone's seen the film with sight, Tom Cruise has his glasses on and he whips them off and gives the evil eye. So I borrowed dark glasses and I was doing that to the camera. Anyway, this aircraft went down the runway. I had a sighted test pilot sitting next to me, really cramped. It's normally a one-seater, this is a two-seater. By the time I got to the end of the runway, I was doing about 400 mile an hour, just even before I'd taken off, flame pouring out the back, burning 10 liters of fuel a second, 600 liters a minute. So anyone with a car, it's probably about 10 fuel tanks a minute it was using. Anyway, went vertical, and this thing at sea level climbs 50,000 feet a minute. So basically, I went up like a rocket, straight up 50,000 feet. And I was doing what they say, Mach 1.4, over 1,000 miles an hour. If you've ever seen a football field, I could fly from one goalpost to the other in zero point 0.2 of a second. So I was flying over 5 football fields a second. Not at sea level because you through the sound barrier, you'll burst all the windows, but such fun. I became the first blind pilot in world history to vomit at supersonic speed. I just got a bit disorientated, but anyway, a lot of fun. And who thinks, people said when I was wanting to be a pilot, trying to join the Rhodesian Air Force, no, you'll never fly, never be a pilot. And here I am. I was in my, what was I? I was in my late 50s, I think. Um, yeah, flying through the sound barrier. And who says you can't live your dreams? And the big trick is don't be afraid of having big dreams. Failure, dear Evie, is a temporary condition. It's the giving up that makes it permanent. So don't worry. We're so afraid of failing. We're afraid of looking silly, but there's something worse than failing, and that's failing to try. Better to to give the best go to fail. Better to dare to fail than fail to dare. And I haven't succeeded at all the things that I've done, but I had a lot of fun, and I've certainly pushed the limits. And I'm of all the people who looked at things I've done, I am more surprised than anyone else because, as I said earlier, Evie, I wasn't that confident person as a kid. I had very low confidence, thought everyone else was better than me, and I'm so surprised. And I've had a very good sighted guide on my adventures, which we can talk about in a second, but just stopping if you wanted to ask me a question.
No, I mean, I'm just loving sitting here listening to you talk about everything you've done. I mean, it's so amazing to get to hear it all from your perspective. But like I mean, I was just thinking like the 180 from, like you say, being told as an early adult wanting to be a fighter pilot, no, you can't do that. You don't have enough sight to be able to do that. It's never going to happen. To then like 20, 30 years later flying the same flying the plane that you've always wanted to and having that experience with no sight whatsoever, like the 180 is insane, and I imagine must have felt incredibly satisfying as well.
Yes, surprising and satisfying. So the first thing I did when I started running here is I did the London Marathon. Not very well. I had a damaged knee, but anyway, a lot of fun, so I did it. And then my brother phones me from South Africa and says, "Hey, Miles, there's this other thing through the Sahara Desert called the toughest foot race in the world. 5.5 marathons in 6 days. You have a rucksack, you've got to have everything, all your food with you. They give you water along the way." So I went from the London Marathon to the toughest foot race in the world. And I thought, well, give it a go. Crazy to think that you could go and do that when I had no experience running. Someone said, "Blind man, you're going to get blisters on the soles of your feet. So put surgical spirit, rubbing alcohol on your feet, toughen the skin." So I did that, ran out, asked my wife to get me some more. She went, and some miscommunication. So she came back with acetate, acetone, which is you use it to take nail varnish, if you a lady wearing fingernails. I put that in my feet because I didn't read the label, and I burnt off several layers of skin before the race. So I ran this race with my feet literally in tatters. I had pieces of skin hanging off my feet, and my feet were worse at the start of the race, Evie, than most runners at the end. Um, One of the pictures I show if I'm doing a conference, my feet just look like raw hamburgers, just blood and muck and blisters, just all tattered. After the race, for literally several weeks, nearly a month afterwards, we never had a bath. There was sand in the bottom of the bath, and I kept on wondering where the sand was from. And I realized it was coming, the blisters in my feet, the sand had been squashed in, compacted so much over the 6 days running this race that it took weeks and weeks for them. Anyway, that was the most painful experience in my life. But what I found amazing, Evie, is that because I didn't want to give up, I didn't want to let down the people who were sponsoring me, I got through it. And there's a lovely quote: only those willing to risk going too far will discover how far it is possible to go. And this thing about endurance and not giving up to endure, none of us, Evie, you, my dear friend, have still got a lot to know, to experience. Who's that little girl inside you? There's an amazing person inside you, Evie, your mum, everyone listening to me, just saying, let me out, let me go and have a go at this. Um, so people say, well, Miles, I could never run 150 miles through the Sahara Desert. I said, okay, imagine, Evie, someone you love the most in your life, maybe your mum, maybe she's seriously ill, and the only medicine to save her is 75 miles out in the desert at a chemist. Would you run out there to go and get it for your mum, yes or no?
Of course I would.
Yeah. And then would you run back to give it to her?
Of course.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, you might be thinking, oh, I'm not sure I want to do 150 miles through the Sahara Desert. But if there was a reason to do it, you would. So the thing that surprises me so much, Evie, the biggest barriers you or I or any of us will ever have to overcome in our lives are ones that we have constructed in our own minds. Those that say they can, those that say they can't, they're both right. And the biggest thing holding us back, holding you back, holding me back, is only 5 inches, and that's the distance between our ears. Because the biggest battlefield in the world is not out there, Armageddon, or what's going on in Ukraine or whatever. It's in our head. Those say they can, those say they can't, they're both right. And I have a little card with a picture of me at the bottom of the Red Sea with a friend of mine in his wheelchair. I'm pushing him along the bottom of the Red Sea using my white stick to find the way. Just a silly thing. But the quote on it is, the only limits in your life are those you accept yourself. So that for me has been my sort of talisman, the idea of what I wanted to live my life. The only limits are those you accept myself. So don't say I can't, or it's impossible to say, well, I haven't done it yet. And you may not succeed the first time, but hey, as long as you don't give up, it doesn't matter how many times you fall in a ditch. If you get out of the ditch one more time and you fall in, you're a success. So, yeah, so that was it. So, running, I did that Sahara Marathon. Then I did one through the Qatar Desert, which was only 120 miles, but did it with four other people, setting a world record non-stop, unsupported. So, I was in a harness pulling a desert cart that weighed 400 pounds. All we're carrying was water. Each of us had 60 liters of water to get through the desert. And we went for 3.5 days without sleep. So that was interesting. And again, me just um, learning how far I could go without sleep. And again, my feet in a mess. When I took my socks off at the end, 8 of my toenails had all come off. Just anyway, blah blah. Not very nice. Um, so I then did one through the Gobi Desert in China, 11-day ultramarathon there. Took my son with me. I always try and involve my kids. So my son, when he was 15, took him out of school, and he climbed Kilimanjaro. He was my guide climbing Kilimanjaro, which is the biggest mountain in Africa, about 19,000 feet or something. And his geography teacher said he's going to learn more climbing Kili, with all the different climatic regions. Then anyway, so did that. Um, oh, so he was my guide running through the Gobi Desert, and then I did one through Death Valley. That's much harder than the Sahara Desert. It's called the Badwater Ultra. You've got basically 48 hours to run 135 miles through the hottest place on earth. You're running on the road. The road is 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You can you can fry an egg on the tarmac. And he basically got 48 hours to do 135 miles. That was interesting. So that was running. Um, I wanted to be the first blind man to climb Mount Everest. Now, I'd done no mountaineering training, but my guide in the desert, we were living in the same village. I live in Duffield in Derbyshire, outside Derby. Um, he lives in the same village, and he said, Miles, if ever you want to do any running, if I can help you as a sighted person, I'm happy to come. So I got him running through the desert with me and stuff. And we've done lots of stuff, Himalayas, Antarctica. I heard him saying to some of his friends a little while ago, he says the day that he met me, that was the day that God cursed his life. So, which I think is a very unfair thing to say. It's only because we've nearly died a few times and he blames me. Anyway, so he was my guide through Death Valley and stuff. Um, so I wanted to climb Mount Everest. I read all these books, Into Thin Air, Touching the Void, um, and I realized that the Everest isn't that hard. It kills a lot of people. But I thought if I train and do more extreme stuff in training, so I went to Aberdeen up in the Scottish Highlands in the middle of winter, had some winter mountaineering training. So I was doing with my friend what we call grade 3 technical ice climbing, which is basic crampons, ice axes, and you're climbing about an 80-degree, almost vertical cliff of ice. So, and that was sort of minus 30, 70 mile an hour winds. Um, and with the Hillary Step on the north face of Everest, it's not as steep as that. And I thought, well, so I'd never done any mountaineering, but John was with me. John's a very good mountain rescue guy, so he knew a lot more about mountaineering. Anyway, so I went up to the Himalayas, do some training in the Everest region. I had some sort of altitude anomaly. They thought I'd had a stroke. So all the way back to Kathmandu in a helicopter, never fly again, it'll kill you, blah, blah, blah. So when I came back to the UK, I went to Chris Bonington, he's a very famous British mountaineer. I went to his high altitude doctor down in Harley Street in London, and he looked at all of my tests from Kathmandu. They had me in hospital wired up and stuff. And he said, oh no, it's a thing called Cheyne-Stokes syndrome, just high altitude anomaly. Everest might kill you, but give it a go, and it's fine. It won't be the altitude. But I'd messed up. I was hoping in 2001 to do Everest. So I said to John, we were then off climbing Kilimanjaro. This is now true. So very quick thing. So in 1 year, January, end of January, I was in Scotland for 2 or 3 weeks, winter mountaineering training. March through part of April, I was in the Himalayas there for a month, learning, getting altitude training and stuff. July, came back and did Kilimanjaro. 10 days later, did Mont Blanc. And then 9 weeks after that, heading off to Antarctica. But anyway, so I'm coming down. I was messed up with the time to do Everest the next year. So I said to John, we're climbing Kilimanjaro. And as we're on our way down, I said to John, hey, if I can't be the first blind man on the top of the world, Mount Everest, what about first blind man, bottom of the world, South Pole? John said, oh, that sounds great. So that was it. We had, and again, I was seeing if RNB would sponsor me, support me. 10 days later, did Mont Blanc, got caught in a massive storm, 5.5 feet of snow, sorry, 4.5 feet of snow in 5 hours, massive storm. 4 climbers died in the storm around us. We didn't reach the summit, but we didn't die. And more people die in Mont Blanc than on Everest each year, but they don't advertise it much. Anyway, so I decided then, let's go to the South Pole. I'd never skied on snow before, but I thought, well, lots of time. It's 760 miles from the Antarctic coast to the South Pole. It took only 9 weeks, Evie, from coming down Kilimanjaro, saying, John, let's head for the South Pole. Yep. So talk about dream, big dream, blind man, want to climb Everest, no mountaineering experience. Make a decision. Yep. Plan. Yep. I got sponsors. I had some people who organized 2 Russian high altitude climbers who would go with us. That was it. And then just persevere. So that was messed up anyway. So 9 weeks after climbing down Kilimanjaro, I'd sorted it all out. We had logistics. I was on an aeroplane heading to the bottom of South America, Punta Arenas down at the bottom. And it only took 9 weeks from having a dream to one of being the first blind man to manhole a set to South Pole. 9 weeks later, we're on our way. So another big thing I've learned, you can have a big dream and you don't have to wait a long time to make that dream a reality. So that was a lot of fun. I remember one person saying, "Blind man, how are you going to be guided in Antarctica?" There was me and John, there were two others coming with us. There's katabatic winds. So you've got this howling wind blowing from the South Pole outwards. What happens if you can't hear what John is saying to you? And I said, "Well, I don't know. We'll just have to suck it and see." He said, "Blind man, you're being totally irresponsible, heading to Antarctica, a lot of money involved, and you don't know if you can succeed." And I said, "Yeah, but no blind man's ever been there before. Someone's got to be the first, and we don't know. Is it possible? Well, if it's possible, it's achievable." So I'd never skied on snow in my life. I'd done downhill dry slope skiing, Evie, but never on snow. I figured, well, lots of time to learn and no one to laugh if you fall over. So that was it. Headed off for the South Pole. Um, Amazing. As it turned out, after 37 days, um, pulling the sledge heading for the South Pole, I got frostbite in my fingers. It turns out I had a circulation problem, which I didn't know about. So I wanted to carry on to the pole, but in radioing back to London and stuff, when we had a base at the South Pole, I didn't know, but the people at R&B had contacted the insurance people, and they said Miles now has a declared problem, a medical issue with frostbite. If he continues and has to be rescued before he reaches the pole, the the insurance wouldn't cover him because it's now a declared problem. I wanted to carry on, but I couldn't. So, Evie, I was so disappointed. Not only would I have been the first blind man to man all said to the pole, that's at about 1,200 kilometers, I would have been the first person from any country in Africa, the whole continent of Africa, sighted or, not a person with a disability. So few people have man hauled us there to the South Pole. More people have gone into space. And the amazing thing, pulling a sledge day after day, went over a bit of a crevasse problem, but anyway, uh, didn't fall into it. But if we needed help, the closest people to us were on the International Space Station. If you want to know how remote Antarctica is, it's 2 or 3 times as big as Australia. Massive place, absolutely beautiful. For me, that was the hardest mental thing. The physical thing, the hardest thing was Sahara Desert with my feet so badly blistered. But this thing was mental, day after day. Wind might be -20, -30, wind blowing in your face. It's cold, um, pulling this heavy sledge, and I couldn't see a thing. And I'm thinking, "Barbara, what are you doing, you silly idiot? Why did you want to do this?" Every day, about 10 hours a day, pulling this sledge. But it was a great experience. So I was so disappointed I didn't make it to the pole. I wanted to carry on, but I went as far as I could, and what held me back was not my blindness, Evie. It was the circulation problem and my hands. I mean, as you know as well, Evie, our hands are so important for us, whether you're using computer or just that sense of touch. So even now, it's -1 as I'm speaking to you here in Derbyshire. If I go for a walk with my wife, I'll on purpose not wear any gloves. And in the end, I've got literally tears running down my cheeks. I'm in so much pain from my hands. And my wife is saying, "Miles, you idiot, where are your gloves?" And it's me, Evie, having to remind myself it was the right decision. Sometimes I wake up at night and I think, "Miles, you could have made it, but when my hands are so cold and they've gone white and, I realize now I would have lost my fingers. Anyway, so lots of fun. So that was uh, Antarctic things, mountaineering. I've done bobsleighing down the Olympic track in Lillehammer. That was great fun. You get up to about 80 miles an hour, less than a minute. I did the skeleton run there. That is scary. You're lying on a glorified tea tray. You're holding on, lying down, your nose about 2 inches above the ice, and you're holding on by your hips behind you. Um, and you're pulling 5 Gs around 17 corners. That was the most frightening thing I've ever done. Imagine going down the motorway at say 80 mile an hour in a car, but imagine that you're now on ice and your body is weighing up to half a ton going around these corners, and your nose is just above that ice going past at 80 miles an hour. Anyway, so that was good fun. Um, I've done 40 skydiving jumps, but I did those when I was partially sighted in Rhodesia, so I had to pretend I could still see all right. Whitewater rafting down the Zambezi. Um, I got thrown out. And again, I couldn't tell the people, I couldn't see. I had a friend of mine sort of guiding me down this steep cliff into the gorge just below the Victoria Falls. It's a 26-mile trip. You go through, I think, 17 rapids. And one of them, I hit this great big wall of water, got thrown out the back of this raft, and the guy was throwing out a rope with a float on to try and help me, but of course I couldn't see and everyone yelling. So I did 3 sets of rapids on my own, quite scary, sort of by braille, and I could hear the sound of these water just pouring around underneath me, and I got thrown out and sucked down. I spent about 10 seconds underwater, and I thought my life jacket had come off because there was so much turbulence. There was no, I had so much air around me as well and bubbles that, uh, and I thought I was dying. I went through this funny thing. People say sometimes when you're dying, you have your life going in front of you. And I had all these green pictures in front of me of my childhood. And I thought, oh, it's the way to die. Anyway, I popped up. I was right. So when I got back in, the guy said, you didn't tell me you were blind. I said, I'm not blind. I just can't see for looking. He said, what's the difference? I said, oh, well. Anyway, he was so proud of me when he realized I was blind. He let me row. It's about 8, 9 of us in this raft, and he let me do 3 sets of rapids with him yelling port and starboard on the oar. So that was a lot of fun. I've done some motor racing on the Malaysian Grand Prix circuit. I hold the lap record for a blind driver um, with my sighted friend John. Um, Drag racing, I've done some drag racing centre part here in the UK. That's easy for a blind man. You've got a sighted person sitting next to you. And imagine the middle of the track you're going down, Evie, is like a 100-meter athletics track. So you've got your 8 or 9 lanes or whatever, how many you run. So I said to my sighted guide, okay, number 5 is the middle of the track. So as the green light goes and he yells, go, I'm accelerating down the track, only getting up to about 150 mile an hour in a Honda Civic Type R, nothing compared to the really big ones. Anyway, so he was yelling, and if I'm in the middle of the track, he's saying 5, 5, 5. If I start drifting a bit to the left, 4, 4, 4, but to the right, 6, 6, 6. As I'm going through the gears, it's easy to stay in the middle. Malaysian Grand Prix circuit wasn't quite as easy, but we had a bit of a system with my friend yelling. And then I drove a Mustang 5.6 litre V8 Mustang on the South African Killarney circuit outside Cape Town. And that baby was a beast, did 0 to 60 mile an hour, 2.8 seconds. So a lot of fun. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you, Evie, and all of your beautiful people who follow your amazing podcast is I'm a blind person, but still having a lot of fun. And it's pointless me belly aching and saying, why have I gone blind? God, what have I done to deserve going blind? I don't know, you know. But if you look at what's happening around the world today, Gaza, Ukraine, we've got so much to be thankful for. And I've just had an amazing time. And in I started the RNB asked me to start speaking at conferences to encourage other blind people. Then I started running my own business. Um, and I started making my living speaking at conferences. So now, Evie, I've spoken in 74 countries, about 1,600 corporate events. And here's a crazy thing. When I came to England, I had no confidence, no dignity, no independence. I felt absolutely useless. I could not walk 200 yards from our house in Duffield down to the local shop to buy a loaf of bread. Useless, couldn't do anything. Had to hold on to my wife's elbow. And if someone said to me, one day you'll want to be attempting to climb Everest, head to the South Pole, motor racing, um, I would have had a panic attack. And to think I've done all of that, and it's um, just the privilege of having people who believe in you. And my friend John Cook, my sighted guide, um, and for all of you listening, whatever your disability, if you need sight, as Eva, you and I do, just try and find someone who's willing to go with you. The world is full of people who are willing to help. I've played stuff called goalball, which blind people can play. I've done some golf as a blind person with someone just helping to line me up on the tee and stuff. But life is a beautiful gift, and every day, Evie, yeah, it's a gift from God. My wife is seriously ill. just before COVID, she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a form of bone marrow cancer. And so we're on limited time. I've been married now for 49 years. Huh. And my kids say, Dad, um, thanks for marrying mum. Best mum we could have had in the whole world. Then I hear them saying to their mum, why did you marry Dad? Did you have a bad hair day? Didn't you think about it? So what am I telling you? For me, life is different all the time. So my big thing now, Evie, I'm a carer for my wife. I'm her primary carer. She's she's in remission, but very limited in what she can do. So I'm helping with dressing. I do all the cooking, cleaning, laundry, ironing, whatever. So for me, the big challenge is um, I hope your mum isn't listening and she expects you to now start doing all the cooking and laundry, Evie. But for me, it's just another challenge. Can I have a house looking clean and neat and people come around for a cup of tea or whatever and think, well, that's okay. I can run the house. I do have actually a cleaner who comes in once a week now just because it takes the pressure of me. I'm still doing some corporate speaking, but only in the UK. And if I do, then I get one of my kids or someone to stay with Steph while I'm doing it. So there's always somebody with her. But life is, as I said, it's a wonderful gift. There's a poem. It's a lady called Mary Jean Iron. She's written a poem called Normal Day. It goes like this. Normal day, let me be aware of the treasure that you are. Let me not pass you by in a quest for some perfect tomorrow. For one day, I will bury my face in my pillow, or dig my fingers into the soil, or raise my hands to the sky and long for more than all the earth your return. What am I saying? I'm saying, dear precious Evie, every day is a gift, and it's to be enjoyed. If parents have children, Christmas is just gone. Imagine Christmas night now, and there's little children, 5, 6, 7 years old, and there's still presents under the Christmas tree unwrapped with their name on it. You think, whoops, we need to go to the hospital. There's something wrong with our child if she doesn't open them. But every day, Evie, is a gift from God. I mean, I believe in God, whatever people have their own choice, but um, whatever you believe, it's a gift. You and I will never have this moment again here chatting. Yes, it'll go out on your podcast, but you and I sitting here, it's a once in a lifetime experience. And every day, I remember when I used to travel by train to London, speaking at a conference there from Derby, a couple of hours by train. Everyone's so busy on their phones, on their computers. Nobody bothers to look out the window, going past all the different towns and cities we go past. And so many people, Evie, are so busy that each day is just seen as a means to an end. It's a way of ticking off your to-do list. And okay, Evie, you're doing your A levels now, and yes, a couple of days' time you're back at school, you've got structure, homework and stuff to do. But try and use part of that day to, smell the coffee. You can you can look out the window and not see anything, but you can open the window, you can take in the fresh air. People said, blind man, why do you bother to climb Kilimanjaro if you can't see the view? Well, I've stood on the highest point in Africa and I could feel the ice cold wind on my cheeks and stuff and had a lot of fun. So appreciate the day, everything. You have a nice meal. Wow, there's people out there living on the streets just down the road from you and I, nowhere to live. So whatever it is, I had a hot bath earlier. What a blessing. There's well over 1 billion people on this world who've never had hot water. They may have had a hot drink, but they've never had a hot shower, had a hot bath. What a privilege. So life is a beautiful gift, and I hope that you and all the people who follow your podcast will appreciate life. Don't complain about what you can't do. No matter what life throws at you, other people are much worse off. Count your blessings, and life is good. And even when we're having a hard day together, my wife and I, we sit and we've got a little summer house in the back garden. We sit and listen to the birds, watch the birds, feed them, and just appreciate all the good things in life. And so, yeah, two two lives. We begin the second one the day we realize we've only got one. And the harbor is the safest place for a ship, but ships aren't designed to be in the harbor. They're meant to be out on the ocean. And only when we're willing to lose sight of the shore will we discover the oceans of the world. And so my message to you, dear Evie, and all of your listeners, it's a beautiful life out there, no matter what your situation. Get out there, embrace it, dream, decide, plan, persevere. And the only limits in your life are those that you accept yourself.
Oh, Miles, I mean, I admire you so much, genuinely. And I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. It has been so special to get to talk to you and to just sit and listen to you talk and listen to your stories and listen to your adventures. Um, that has been such an honor for me to be able to do. And I think you are such a special person and I really admire you. There are no limits for you. And that's very clear. There are no limits. You are basically unstoppable, and I admire you so much. And thank you for letting me hear your story. Thank you for letting my audience hear your story. And thank you for doing this. It's been such a pleasure to get to meet you.
And Evie, perhaps in passing, the biggest mistake is for people to think, oh, Miles Hilton-Barber, what an amazing guy he is. No, I was just an ordinary wimp, a skinny kid with very little confidence in life. Never thought I'd achieve anything. And it's just that thing of stepping outside the circle, just trying to do something you've never done before. Every little step slowly builds up your confidence. And for me, it was a step-by-step process. So all I want to say to you is, if you've been listening to me on the podcast and you come away thinking what an amazing person I am and what a useless person in comparison you are, you've totally missed it. I want you to go away thinking, if that silly blind twit can go and do those things, wow, I'm starting to think about what I can do. So get that bucket list going. Make a decision, whatever time of day or night you're listening to this podcast, before you go to sleep. Think about at least one, make a decision for at least one thing you're going to make a decision to add to your bucket list and start doing it, and you'll be amazed just how easy it is. And Evie, in closing, I just want to say I'm very proud of you, and I'm amazed in your young life that you've already achieved so much running this podcast. And I've got no doubt that countless thousands upon thousands of people are having their lives changed because of your vision and your dedication and your busy life doing A levels, doing these podcasts. So God bless you and your family. And I hope one day when you're an amazing, famous person, you'll give me your autograph.
Of course. I mean, I don't know if I'll be famous. I'd love to, but of course I would. And thank you. I really appreciate it. That really means a lot. And thank you so much to my audience for listening. And I will see you all next time.